It's an honor to be here amongst professionals who dedicate their lives to healing and helping others. A little bit about me before we get started. I was a leadership professional for most of my professional career, spent about 20 years in management, got a master's in management and leadership, and shortly after I completed that degree, I kind of had a moment where I realized I hated everything about that. I didn't like my job. The only part about management that I liked was the relationship and connections that I made with people and the stories that we would share. I didn't really like much of anything else. And I started to get kind of really depressed, and then I started to go to therapy, and I was in therapy for about 6 months when we realized that the biggest problem in my life at that moment was that I wasn't living the life I had kind of always wanted to. From the time I was little, I had a very clear vision of being a writer and helping people in some way. I didn't know how when I was little, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I kind of returned to my first love of writing, and I started writing and sharing stories about healing, about trauma, about my life. I started writing fiction. I went to a writing group, and we were talking about writing my book, kind of about the big traumas that I've experienced, and I was stuck, and she recommended writing a different book, and I was like, this is the book I've planned for 30 years. Like, what different book should I write? So I ended up walking around the Lake Elmo, to get some inspiration, and then I had an idea to make a coffee table book. So I was going to take a picture every single day around Lake Elmo, and kind of as a metaphor of how life is, right? Like, it's the same path I was walking every day, but the weather was different, or it was a different time of day, or the season was different, and something changed on that same path every day. And that was kind of the way I was going to go with it, was how life is just ever changing, even on a path that is kind of consistent. So I committed to walking around the lake every day for a year. I made it about 7 months. Every day I walked through, it was that winter where it was really cold and we had like negative temperatures for like 30 days straight. And one day when I was walking around the lake, they hadn't plowed the path yet. And so the snow was clear up to my knees. I was trudging around the whole path. And I was writing and taking pictures. And throughout all of that growth that was happening, I was writing all of these articles and pieces, and I ended up publishing them on Medium, and then I ended up getting clients and found myself replacing my full-time income with writing. And I thought, oh gosh, this is like great. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And then I realized that I wanted to write more kind of technical, helpful things, and so I thought, oh, I'm gonna go back to school, because that's usually my go-to answer for everything. I go back to school. So I decided to pursue a PhD in psychology, which I'm currently still working on. And then that's kind of been the progression of my growth over the last 4 years professionally. And then recently I attended a seminar by Heather Maccabee over with the Next Gen Leadership group. And she was talking about some holistic healing practices, specifically EFT and TFT, which I wasn't familiar with at all. I obviously had heard of things like, cognitive therapy, EMDR, but I was eager to see Heather's kind of holistic practices in action. So she had us do a group session toward the end of her presentation. And there was a few questions that she asked us, and asked us to write down what came to our minds first. So the first question she asked is, what is a goal you have for your business or professional development? This one was easy for me. We've recently started a website, and I wanted 1 million users. Initially, I didn't follow your directions exactly, because my initial thought was 3 million users, because that's what the website I used to work for would get a month, and so that's what I wanted to write. And then I was like, well, you can't really go from 1,200 to like 3 million, so let's do 1 million. So I put 1 million.
Are you putting this online? Put your hair like that.
What's happening to my hair?
You're good.
Okay.
Oh, there was kind of, I couldn't see it. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
It's kind of dark on that side of your head.
So anyway, so that was my goal for our business and professional development question, was 1 million users for resilient stories. And then the next question was, why have you not reached this goal already? And I thought, oh, okay, this is an easy answer too. My website's 3 months, 3.5 months old. Websites are slow. They very rarely, I mean, unless you go viral in some weird space, they're not something that happens overnight. You don't get 1 million users in 3 months. That's super crazy and rare. And I also added how Google hates me. So that's sort of an inside joke. Google constantly does new algorithms and updates to its search platform and how it finds articles that it recommends. And that's part of how I got laid off from my job, was we got hit really hard with the helpful content update, and we got hacked at the same time, and so our traffic tanked and our whole department got laid off from the previous website that we worked at. So that was my answer for question 2, was we were just starting and Google hates me. The third question that Heather asked was, what incident from your past is holding you back? So this question was kind of pivotal to me. And before I dive into what I answered, I'd like to just talk about trauma for a second. So trauma doesn't fit a single mold. We talk about big T traumas a lot, those severe life-altering events like abuse, car accidents, sudden deaths, violent things. But there are those little t traumas which seem minor but can embed themselves deep in your psyche. And little t trauma can be deceptive. It doesn't always scream its presence. Instead, it might whisper through our nervous system, make our muscles tense with unresolved stress, or could manifest as in things like binge eating disorders that emerge to help people cope with deep emotional pain. So my journey with trauma has been marked by a high ACE score. I have a 9. So when we talk about big T traumas, I've got a few. So when Heather asked what event from your past was holding you back, sadly, I kind of had a moment where trauma is not a competition, right? And we tell people this all the time on our website, like whatever traumatic event you went through and you used resilience to overcome is valid and important, and we want to help you share your story and we want to help you heal. Because we do hear from people like, oh, my trauma's not that bad, or oh, I didn't go through something like this article did over here. We tell people all the time, it's not about that. It's not about that. But this was like the moment where you're taking a test and you know the right answer. I was like, oh, I have answers that I could put for this question. It could be the abandonment issues caused by both of my parents leaving before I was 5. Or how when I did live with my mother, I would have to make her coffee to get her out of bed in the morning at 4 because she had stripped and done drugs at the nightclub the night before. Or it could be the time that she killed my pets, either through neglect or actively shot my rabbit and left it in a trash bag by the edge of the property, which I later discovered. Then there's the time that she went into the witness protection program right before I started high school. So when I was thinking initially about these past thoughts that are holding me back, I was like, which one? Which one's gonna be the answer to this question? And I'm sitting there with my iPad and my pencil, and she asks, and I jot down, the kids were mean to me and said I had fluffy hair and I was overweight and wore big glasses because I can't see. And I was like, I literally giggled. I don't know if you remember or noticed that I giggled when I wrote that down, because I looked at this answer and was like, what? What? How is that the thing holding you back? And then I realized that it does hold me back constantly. My business partner and I have talked a lot about how big we want resilient stories to be. I want to give a TED Talk. I don't have a fear of public speaking at all. I like talking. I like people. I'm not shy. But being on video, being on camera, those kinds of things really stress me out, because I'm sitting here as we're talking now and I'm thinking, my hair is out of place. My makeup, I have too little or not enough. Does this shirt make me look fat? Like, all of these things are running through my head as I'm speaking. And I discovered this at Heather's presentation. And I noticed how I had literally held myself back just moments before. There was a group of women who I'd previously met at the Women's Leadership Conference, and they were standing together speaking, and they're all very beautiful, professional women, and they look very put together. And they were talking, and I was waiting to speak to Heather, and she was speaking to somebody else, and I was kind of in the middle. Like, I didn't want to get too close to Heather and the person she was speaking with out of, privacy. They were having a conversation. And I also didn't gravitate toward the group of women who were having a conversation over here. And when I really thought about it as I was writing my answer and leaving and kind of processing what had happened, I realized that in my head, that felt like the popular kids at high school. They all looked so perfect, so pretty. They were laughing. Their makeup was, very nice. Their outfits were super stylish. They looked great. They were professional and presenting themselves as such. And I kind of just stood off to the side like I didn't belong there. And I thought, that has nothing to do, well, some self-esteem issues might have to do with some of my big T traumas, but I've worked on all of those a lot. What I hadn't worked on was the kids who were mean to me. And I realized that our little T traumas can hold us back a lot more than we think they do, especially when those of us have lots of bigger traumas, right? Like when I was in high school, what so-and-so said about how I looked that day was the least of my problems. I had a mom who was missing in the witness protection program. I had a mom who'd been missing my whole life. I had a grandma who, is verbally and physically abusive. I had big problems. So, people calling me Elvis because my hair curled in a weird way when it's cut short didn't really factor into the things that I thought about. But it stuck. It stuck deep somewhere that to this day, when my business partner and I make a YouTube video, it takes me 5 hours to edit it because I don't want to look at it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put it out there. But I know that I need to not hold ourselves back from our business being more successful. So what all this means for practice with clients, now I don't see clients, but what I noticed is when I was in therapy, we would talk a lot about the big T traumas. And I think I mentioned a few times that, I was bullied in school a little bit and, some kids were mean, but we kind of glossed over that because, again, there were big things that her and I needed to unravel. And I feel like I've gotten a good handle, for the most part, on most of those things. And I was shocked for myself to learn that it was something which seems so insignificant and so long ago that was still kind of rearing its ugly head in the back of my mind today at, almost 40, or not almost, I am 40. Clearly I just want to be almost 40, but yeah. Anyway, so with patients, I feel like as professional therapists and holistic healers, we need to really ask those questions because it was 3 simple questions that Heather asked that got me to dig this out, and it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard to dig it out at all. It just came out. And I'd spent, 4 years going weekly to therapy and had never gotten to this conclusion in that process at all. That, I can move past all of my big T traumas now and live a relatively typical life, but there's still these little pieces and voices that are deep inside that seem silly, right? Like when my, teenager was in high school and she'd tell me people were mean to her, I was always like, people are mean, like, just ignore them. What their opinion doesn't, define who you are. And I say all the right things to her about how to handle, when people have a different opinion of you or when, you're questioning your own self-worth. Like, I'm giving her all the helpful answers, but I'm not applying them to these smaller traumas that stuck with me for 30 years, 25 years. So just be mindful of this full spectrum of trauma, and in recognizing the significance of both big T traumas and little T traumas, that'll enable you guys to offer more compassionate and comprehensive care and help patients move forward as well as some of ourselves. So then I had a little interactive thing here, which
you can do it.
We'll
interact.
All right. So in your practice, do you find that your patients are more often held back by big T traumas like major disasters or abuse, or little T traumas like persistent criticism, bullying, losing a job, being cheated on? What do you guys feel you see the most of? Big T traumas, little T traumas, or a combination of the two?
Combination.
Equally,
Yeah,
you would say?
I would say combination.
Yeah, okay.
I would even include moving as
Yep.
a little T.
Yep. Yep.
I get that. all those things that cause the dysphoria, or not even ACE, like the highly stressful, what is that? I don't even know what it is, but like the most highly stressful events of your life or
Yes.
whatever. Like
Yes.
moving is one of the top.
Yes.
But yeah, just like those everyday stressors too, and I I love what you're talking about. Like, well, because there's so many people that'll be like, well, they feel that because trauma is like trending now, right? Like people that haven't had these huge like, traumatic events happen to them, they're always like, well, I don't think I have any trauma. Like,
Yep.
But like, I feel that we all do.
We
like,
all
if
do.
you do digging, like there's things that are holding you back that you don't even realize. Like it's the big things that people are like, oh yeah, like they can clearly see that is having an effect, or they've dealt or they've worked through it or whatever. But it's the little things that they don't even realize are having an effect on them.
Right.
And they're the things that are troublesome.
Yeah, and that still hold them back 25
Yeah.
years later. Like, what? It's crazy to me that, you know, something that even at the time I viewed as insignificant. Like at the time I was I did not care about these girls, right? Like I didn't wear makeup in high school because I didn't care. I left a job because they told me I had to wear makeup, and I was like 19 at the time. And I was like, oh no, I don't. You don't make the boys wear makeup. I'm not wearing makeup. I'm out of here. Bye. And I gave 2-week notice and I quit. Yeah, like, right? And so I'm thinking like, I do what I want, right? My self-esteem is great. I don't wear makeup because I don't want to, but that's not really the truth. The truth is I don't wear makeup because I question how I do it all the time. I question if it looks stupid. I question if I've put too much on because my grandma would say I look like a clown. And then my friends would say, oh, you look so pretty. And then I would argue with my grandma and be like, oh no, you know, so-and-so said I looked really pretty. And she'd say, well, the other girls are going to tell you that, so you look stupid and they look better. And I would be like, okay, so like to this day, 25 years later, I'm like, I don't know the answer, so I just don't wear it, right? Okay, so yeah, those little things that feel like they shouldn't matter, especially when you have experienced big T trauma stuff, like it can get shoved away down and pushed aside, yeah. Okay, so question number 2 is, which type of trauma do you find more challenging to treat in your practice? So there's big T trauma, little T trauma, or both present unique challenges.
I actually struggle with big T because I feel like I haven't had much because my background is like cognitive behavioral therapy, and while I've had them in school, like when I was going through my master's, like had the different modalities and everything, like I kind of was pulled towards that, and I'll pull in like attachment theory and like those kinds of things, but they're not really for treating big T trauma. So I usually refer, or we talk about going to like EMDR or a different.
And you don't do EMDR?
I don't. I never got certified in it.
Okay.
And so I feel that that's more challenging for me is the big T.
Okay.
I like the big T.
Yeah.
You like the big, so you think the little T is more
I can
trauma?
out of the big T really well. I think I like it because I can see how quickly they can come out of it. I don't struggle with the little T either.
Okay. Okay. So what therapeutic challenges would you guys associate with the different types of trauma, and what kind of treatment strategies would you use for each one? So when you talk about moving people through the big T trauma easier and faster, like what are you using to do that?
What modalities am I using? Resonance repatterning, EFT tapping, constellation work, family systems,
All the fun stuff.
hypnotherapy.
All the fun stuff. Yes. I was like watching when you were giving your presentation, I was just like, what is all this? Because they don't teach that in PhD psychology school. I'm like, what has she got going on here? Because I could see it. I could see how it could move people very fast. And I think we had a conversation after that where I was saying how 4 years in therapy was not as productive as a group, you know, here's a teaser about what I do.
Right, it wasn't even an individual.
Right, it wasn't even an individual thing. And I was like, whoa, like, I see that. Okay, that's cool. And yeah, I was pretty fascinated by all the modalities that you use, because I'm a bit of a weird person, so they appealed to me. I was like, ooh, resonance repatterning. I gotta learn what that is. That sounds fun. And what kind of modalities do you use?
So I I prefer the little T's and like helping. You know, I lean more towards like coaching more than counseling, even though I'm like licensed therapist and everything. And a lot of mindfulness, a lot of like helping relaxation, and then just challenging the negative thinking and reframing thoughts and those kinds of things, which again lends more towards the little than the big, than the big T. Like,
And it's kind of the same for me because I don't have a clinical degree.
Yeah.
So I just have a life coaching certification. And, you know, in that we don't diagnose, we don't deal with like trauma in the mental health kind of way of doing, you know, therapies.
Yeah, like mine,
So
I've
it's a lot
always
of
like,
coaching.
well, my sister-in-law is a psychiatric nurse, so when we opened up our practice, like, we have both different businesses and stuff, and she is like, I mean, she's all like psychedelics, and like, she is very much into the severe mental illness.
Yes.
And I've always been like, I can deal with depression and anxiety, which I feel like I mean, they're significant, but they're still like compared to like schizophrenia and like bipolar and borderline and all this stuff. I'm like, I like these cases because I feel that they're, like I'm very goal oriented, and I'm like, let's work on like some life goals and like that kind of thing. Like I like moving people more from like, you know, more of like that baseline to forward, rather like mental health, like therapy and even what you do and everything, like it moves them from like a debilitating state to that baseline, right? Because you have to work through all that trauma and everything to get to that baseline. And so I'll be like, okay, well, I like I guess like higher functioning or higher capacity.
Yeah. But they're closer to the baseline, and you want to move them to like passion and full
to
life.
The potential. Yeah, like to the potential, rather than just get them like that functioning piece.
Right.
Whereas that's just kind of where I've been drawn to.
Okay.
Oh.
Makes total sense. Heather, what's your favorite modality? Because I know you have
I
quite a
blend
few.
all of them.
You just blend all of them at
blend
the
all
same
of them.
time? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I had a client this last week. We started in resonance repatterning. We moved into Maggie Block. We did some tapping. Like I blend. I follow whatever the client needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very interesting. Well, guys, that is all that I have.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Thank you.